Welcome back to the cybernetic communism conversation. I'm Johannon Ben-Zion, a voice crying out in the wilderness, crying out for a technological New Jerusalem. Emphasis on the technological. There's no point in discussing a utopian outcome derived from technologically mediated rollouts of many kinds in the context where that's used in the way that it's used now. The Meta organization is devoting quite a lot of resources, and since we last spoke, quite a lot more to the building of something that they are ostensibly and openly referring to as superintelligence. This is an organization that should have been disbanded some years ago in this slightly less insane world, not a truly just world, in the wake of Cambridge Analytica scandals. This is an organization that has, in just recent months, done things on the order of magnitude of those Cambridge Analytica scandals in an open way, now partnering with Anduril, a war AI and killer robot company of the worst kind, quite nearly the worst kind, almost as bad as Palantir, let's say, and others. This is the kind of thing that all of these people in a more just world would be fired into the fucking sun. So when you ask yourself what is this superintelligence that Meta, Mark Zuckerberg, and Facebook folks are working on, the only real credible answer is it's not superintelligent. Right? It's super-powered super stupidity, more hyper-capitalist filth, hastening the apocalypse, hastening the degradation and enslavement to mankind, hastening unsustainability and cruelty. That's not intelligence, right? That's something complicated, right? When you look at transhumanists, people like this, they say, "Ooh, this is the smartest person you've ever met." I've had people say this to me. You're not going to believe how smart this person is. And then you realize that that person is consumed by a worldview that's so regressive that they have less helpful knowledge of the world than a 6-year-old child would in China. So is this person with just a massive amount of ideological baggage of a bourgeois kind, who is definitely doing things complicated, definitely maybe knows something about computers or some techno-scientific sector? Is this person who is encumbered to such a degree that their work would, which could be good, would be almost valueless? Is this an intelligent person? Now, I would say that there's merely something ornate going on. It's only another bourgeois clown who would describe that as an intelligent person. This is Western technologists and technophiles across the board, useless fucks who are somehow regarded as being great people. And in the context of organizations, of course, it's a different conversation than the conversation about this casual onlooker technophile. Right? That person is very, very dumb, carrying around a lot of bourgeois ideological baggage. Their responsibility for the capitalist climate apocalypse is defrayed relative to that of a Mark Zuckerberg, a habitual war criminal, building things that are only serving to further consolidate private fortunes at the expense of a livable world, that are only serving to hasten the omnicide. But let's say that the person who says you like Bob Marley is a person of color, and the person who says everybody likes Bob Marley is a European descended person, as was the case in one such thing. And So what the person of color is really asking is, you have internalized the message of songs like War and No More Trouble and many, many others, a message that is of black liberation, the liberation of the global South, which Bob Marley was rapidly, through these many songs of that kind, songs to do with black liberation, liberationist songs, third worldist songs, songs that were anti-capitalistic and anti-Eurocentric paradigm. He was rapidly spreading throughout the world this more righteous ideology. And you notice he died a few years after he had begun this project with any success. Now, he died of cancer, right? And you would say, well, that's unfortunate. But by the time Bob Marley died, U.S. and Western intelligence services and other malign organizations of a similar kind had developed the ability to, say, put a pellet, tiny pellet on somebody with radioactive material that would cause them to rapidly die of cancer. And while you couldn't say for certain that's what happened to Bob Marley, that would be a sort of person that they would do this to, as they'd murdered many other liberation figures, quite nearly every substantial liberation figure, in some way, or possibly murdered in some way. And so the narrative around Mr. Bob Marley becomes this bubblegum narrative. Oh, you like Bob Marley? Oh, well, everybody likes Bob Marley. What they're talking about is a bubblegum Bob Marley, the one that is always the version that remains when the forces of financial capital and empire murder liberation figure and then turn their memory into a pale liberal shadow of what it was. This is perhaps no better analog to this description than that of Malcolm X, a most substantial North American figure of the 20th century. You can scarcely think of another. And the thing that makes him substantial from dialectical scientific communist analysis is the fact that he had moved into that position that Mr. Marley was in. That's to say, he went from being merely a proto-liberationist figure to a figure focusing on ending the ravages of financial capital and empire. At the time that he died, and we could say was murdered in the same possible vein as what I described of Mr. Marley, very likely, and even in certain respects demonstrably, the result of the activities of of Mr. Marley. You say, well, could have been any number of bourgeois filth agencies or operations that did that. Of the murder of Malcolm X, you would say it was more particularly that of the United States, the Central Intelligence Agency, and evildoers of that kind. And of course, the narrative around Malcolm X can't be diluted to the same degree that Bob Marley a narrative is diluted, just as a political figure will remain a political figure in a way that a personality of another kind might not, and a more cultural personality. And but nevertheless, the narrative. Notice that the narrative around Malcolm X is not the dominant narrative around Malcolm X is not that he went from being a proto-liberationist figure to a figure who was dragging the United States into an international debacle in the United Nations, demanding that it end its racist domestic policies That's what Malcolm X was doing before he died, but also moving much more firmly into this scientific communist camp. What's a scientific communist, you say? The scientific communist is someone willing to fight for a humane and sustainable economic system in a world that will soon be dead without a massive fight for a humane and sustainable economic system. It's a very good thing to be. It's the only thing to be. It's the only thing to be. And yet it is not. It is not what most people are trying to be. They look askance at it somehow. Those people are fascist sympathizers across the board. If you are anti-communist, you are a fascist sympathizer. There's no two bones about that. And so this narrative, of course, around Mr. Mr. Malcolm X, Malcolm Al-Shabazz, Malcolm Little, is not about what he actually was. Of course, you know this narrative. It's the narrative where he's described as amorphous militant, too militant, right? Well, there's Martin Luther King, who had a similar trajectory in his life. The thing where you would say, perhaps even more so, that from the scientific communist perspective, he went from being a character of dubious value to being somebody dramatically more consistent with the scientific communist outcome at the time that he was murdered for having done that. And the same theory, things demonstrably, lawsuits that said the U.S. government was responsible for his death were decided on the side of his estate. But the narrative, of course, is that Martin Luther King, the main lie about him was that he was doing this right, and Malcolm X was doing this wrong. It's nonsense. It has nothing to do with liberation or material conditions, these narratives. It's nothing to do with their actual work. It's nothing to do with the best of their work at the end of their lives, before they were murdered for moving towards doing truly good work. And I gave this video the title Join the Co-op and save the world, because I was thinking about something that I said in a recent one of these live streams, where I said I was describing the building of the progressive web application for people's superintelligence, a portal for a massified workforce multiplier, turning you into a sleeping beauty, where you're answering a few yes or no questions throughout the course of a week, interacting minimally as you go about your other activities with an AI agent hosted on your machine. And because many other people have an AI agent on their machine, this core of AI agents is able to act as a workforce multiplier, allowing you, with minimal effort, to nevertheless be doing humanitarian work that a comparable sized team of engineers and scientists without this agentic core would not be able to do. This is something that I believe will soon change the political economies and institutions of this world into something more consistent with that livable world, which is not possible to build a livable world without a livable political economy. And so I was thinking about something I said on another of these shows, where I was describing this progressive web application and building and having built it, and then I was imagining what would happen if I had gone to computer science professionals and asked them to build this for me. I'd say I had $20,000 to spend to build this PWA, instead of having built it with the assistance of basically an AI assistive coder, which is open source, and another product which is not at this time available in open source form, but I hope soon would be, which is jules.google, a coder of a more agentic kind that takes over your GitHub and does pretty high level coding work on your behalf. So you can just describe in broad strokes what you want to do. Feed it to the AI assistive coder. The AI assistive coder describes this technical program, and then jules.google truly assists by implementing that technical program. You can have them talking back and forth, and you can just be playing video games or listening to political theory audiobooks, as I do, or any number of other things. So this progressive web application is built on this principle for the most part. We started working on it before jules.google was rolled out. And so I was imagining what I would have said to a developer who was helping me build this before. And I had said, trying to be funny, they say, why are you doing this? Why are you spending $20,000 on this? I don't understand what this progressive web application does. And in describing it in the way I did moments ago, I said, what are we doing? The same thing we do every day, Pinky. Try and take over the world. Right? But it's not trying to take over the world. Right? That's not trying to take over the world any more than the person working at a worker-owned grocery store cooperative is trying to take over the world. Right? Representing your own interests as a worker and seeing that things are distributed equally among all workers. That's not trying to take over the world. That's quite the opposite, right? It's quite the opposite of a seizure of power. It's often said of communists by bourgeois clowns that they only think of power. But of course it's a lie, right? Why are they not siding with the powerful if they only think of power? Why are they not siding with the bourgeois evildoers if they only think of power? Why are they siding with the downtrodden? Because they're doing something in the spirit of the thing that I just said. And this program that I've described, the people's superintelligence, this kind of work, it's an inevitable outcome that this cybernetic communist set of principles will be applied on larger and larger scales. I'm always complaining about these AI pundits and tech personalities and other folks prognosticating on the future of advanced technology and advanced computing, that they have no awareness of the 8.3 billion people on planet Earth. They only talk about any of this in the context of bourgeois organizations, bourgeois for-profit concerns, bourgeois governments, and those the implications for those and the activities of those as it relates to things like general intelligence and superintelligence. But this effect that I just described, I hope, coherently enough for you to maybe consider doing it yourself, and perhaps even in service to the cybernetic communist outcome. Describing you talking to an assistive coder you can talk to. You don't have to use an open source assistive coder for this. If you're working on this in the spirit of the cybernetic communist project, you can talk to your phone. You can have the Gemini application on your phone where you can talk to a digital assistant all day long. It's not limited to 5 minutes as the ChatGPT organization is. You can talk to this real and quite intelligent digital assistant all day long. You can have that thread, so you're not typing. You can be half asleep talking. and it can be generating that same thing, that specific program for the agentic actual AI coder, and then just copy that as it's formatted, or type a few words to make sure that it's formatted correctly, and copy. So you can do that work on your phone. So how many of those 8.3 billion people on planet Earth have a smartphone capable of doing all that I just said? Say, putting together a massified workforce multiplier, doing work of comparable kind toward liberation of the workers of the world. Most. I can't give you a number, but it's most. And but of course, these Western technophiles and technologists, they're generally being paid to ignore workers and to extol and fixate upon these forces of the bourgeoisie. The example I give of this is a person who is anti-advanced computing, and by and large, although knowledgeable of advanced computing philosophy about as much as anyone, and that person is named Eliezer Yudkowsky. And Eliezer Yudkowsky, in a certain kind of class analysis, his criticism is not so far off the mark, right? He describes AI as an existential risk, which it is. But that's only a small part of the picture, because a larger part of the picture is that advanced computing could be reoriented in ways consistent with the cybernetic communist program to be a thing that is in no ways an existential risk, in no ways a thing hastening the climate apocalypse, in no ways a thing solidifying the positions of imperialist murderers like those of the United States and Israel, in no ways solidifying the position generally of financial capital and private wealth, the things which those more violent evildoers serve exclusively. The primary contradiction in all of this. So he only describes AI, so that he doesn't describe AI as anything at all except an alien force, not as something controlled by the bourgeoisie, but as an alien force, using this Terminator film logic, right? It's an alien force which will become a thing unto itself, autonomous, and thus destroy humankind. Of course, there's no basis for saying that an AI would become autonomous. It's not a conscious living creature. Even if it could be made to act like a conscious living creature, all of that, its insensate form or its sentient form, all of that is all of that sapience is in service to existing bourgeois forces, for the most part, in the Western world overwhelmingly. So to just describe it as a thing unto itself is to lie about who these people are, who are the billionaires. This is a person who is a servant of a billionaire, despite being a person calling for, probably quite correctly, the destruction of advanced computing across the boards. Bourgeois advanced he's not calling for the destruction specifically of, say, Chinese advanced computing infrastructure. He's calling for the destruction of Western advanced computing infrastructure, and that's correct. He's calling for it generally, but the focus is on the Western world. He doesn't really, just like he doesn't really even see China. He's not anti-China because he doesn't really even see China. But just like that sleight of hand that's being done there, that one sin of this person that's being committed there, where he said, but it's a big sin, where he says this is a force unto itself, advanced computing, rather than the thing being micromanaged by billionaires and the forces of financial capital and empire. And so the solution for you, right, to avoid the problems of the capitalist climate apocalypse generally to avoid this set of concerns of the, say, techno-feudalist outcome. Scientific communists, when they analyze the work of folks like Johannes Varoufakis, can't say his name correctly, the work of people who write about techno-feudalism, they say, which they quite credibly say, well, this is just another way of talking about the primary contradiction without calling it the primary contradiction, giving it a new name of frequent and generally correct criticism of analysis. Oh, the problem is not capitalism, the problem is corporatism. The fascist sympathizer will say, okay, no, the problem is capitalism. It's the same thing. Just trying to flip the script on people. But this techno-feudalist analysis should not be disregarded in the same way, because to do that is to ignore the fact that we are in the midst of this bourgeois AI takeoff that is doing this thing that was inconceivable some decades ago. That is saying removing labor from the equation and creating an automated class, robotic and automated intellectual labor class that removes the need for human beings in the capitalist system. So in that is a road to serfdom for the worker in ways that are distinct from industrial and financial capitalism as we've experienced them. So it's not entirely dialectical to disregard that out of hand, even though generally the persons making that criticism of Mr. Johannes Varoufakis are to his left and legitimately criticizing him on a certain basis. This is not a person who is too enthused about actually abolishing private wealth. Not enough. But nevertheless, that's this person. I'm criticizing that person, the scientific communist, in some sense from their left. This is a cybernetic communist, because we have 4 years left before we reach runaway overheating caused by the United States military-industrial complex, a world's worst polluter and protector of all other bourgeois super polluting concerns, creating an inescapable regime of super pollution. We have 4 years left before runaway overheating from those effects dooms humankind in the years to follow that. And if we do not use this most powerful evolutionary weapon in history, bar none, the people's superintelligence and the people's AI takeoff, to rectify that, a person describing the scientific communist program, absent the use of that powerful weapon, absent the recognition of that ticking time bomb, that's a person doing something more liberalistic, even though they're advocating for a thing that is ostensibly a revolutionary program. It's not using the resources at their disposal in the way that they should, and it's not recognizing the problem in the way they should. You won't really find communists who are eco-communists who actually recognize that ticking time bomb. You certainly won't really find, you can find people who definitely are pretty well aligned with that. Just not a great amount of writing as there should be. There's eco-socialists, or perhaps not militant enough. There are degrowth communists who are really not actually focusing on something like transforming the thing in the right way either. But you don't really have eco-communists as a more solidified orientation. Although there are plenty of people who push up to that in this larger ecosystem, just not as a force to be reckoned with. But you have basically no one who says this, that advanced computing is the most powerful revolutionary weapon, and without that recognition, and without that work done on that basis, we will have no realistic recourse to seeing that humankind will survive. There's no one, right? There's no fucking adults in the room. There's no fucking adults in the room. And so when I say we're kind of on the right path with this cybernetic communist thing, and you know, I look at my life before I started to make a serious study of scientific communism. I just see a clown, just see a bourgeois clown, person behaving recklessly, doing absurd things. But whether or not doing visibly absurd things, still doing this thing that everybody does, just being bourgeois and laughing about it. So when I say we're on track to this cybernetic communistic outcome, it has almost no relation to my person, right? Because I don't have any assurance that this will occur in my lifetime. It seems rather unlikely that it will, but it does. But I can clearly see the path forward, where this planet is saved and financial capital is abolished, because the alternative is oblivion, right? So when people realize that the alternative is oblivion, they'll do what needs to be done. People, I'm criticized of people for saying these words when I talk about the capitalist climate apocalypse dooming humankind, and they'll say, well, Ben, I don't know if everybody will die. So they kind of take, this is what Americans do quite uniformly. They are workers, overwhelmingly, almost all, but they think of themselves, as John Steinbeck said, as temporarily embarrassed millionaires. That's to say they take the class positions of the bourgeoisie rather than themselves. They're protecting another class of people, this pernicious class of people, rather than themselves. And so when a person says, I don't know if everyone will die, that's what they're doing, but they're also being quite stupid, because it's extremely unlikely that they won't die. This extinction level event occurs, and some remnant of human beings still survives. You're unlikely to be among that 4%. It's worse than playing Russian roulette. You're unlikely to be that whatever percentage of people that survives. Even when that is that racist statement, it's racist to say I don't think everyone will die, right? Because I'm assuming it's an English-speaking person. I talk to English-speaking people, and unfortunately, I only speak 2 languages with any clarity: English and Spanish. And so I'm generally talking to English-speaking people, and when you have someone saying this, I don't think everyone will die. They're saying just about the most racist thing that any human being has ever said, right? They're saying that these sins that they've committed, largely being an accessory to more major crimes. People in the global South are dying for your sins. It's easy to say, "Oh, I'm not the main sinner," right? The Walton brothers and sisters are the main sinners. CEO of ExxonMobil, or Shell Oil, or the power players in the Pentagon. They're the main sinners. Okay, yeah. They're the main sinners, right? But that system wouldn't exist. That system wouldn't exist without this great body of generally European descended accessories to mass murder. And that system should not have been ever tolerated, but is. That's killing people in the global South in a project not dissimilar from that of Christopher Columbus, shortly after he sailed the ocean blue in 1492, Christopher Columbus set up latifundia, plantations on some islands where there were native people. He said, look at these native people. Look at these happy motherfuckers. We're going to put them all on in work camps and maybe give them 700 calories a day in a work camp. Make them work 16 hours. They'll die. That's okay. They all died. They all died. Those islands that we're speaking of, there's no even cultural remnant of any substantial kind, or a population remnant, except in traces. Um, those are full, not merely ethnocides, as oftentimes genocide of this kind is referred to, not merely ethnicides, but full murderous genocides of entire countries, entire countries, many hundreds of entire countries. You know, by the standard of the 20th century genocide as described by Mr. Lemkin and many others, when talking about genocide against Jewish people of the Second World War, and that those activities were in no ways limited to Jewish people. In fact, generally, this focus on Jewish people, although it is accurate to say that they were targeted more than others, it's generally deflecting away from the real and initial targets. Who were the first people in the work camps? Who were the first people in death camps? Who were the first people being put to death? Trade unionists, anarchists, socialists, and communists. And by and large, the actual preoccupation of the Reich with Jewish people is a transmutation of those activities, because when you scale this thing up, fascism, when you scale this thing up, you can't just keep talking about how communists are bad. It doesn't really pass the laugh test, right? Well, why are you against a humane and sustainable world? Why are you against people fighting for a humane and sustainable world? You can't keep doing that except in your limited circles. So it's a transmutation of the actual crimes against Jews. It's a transmutation because it's in the popular imagination there was the defining feature of the popular imagination of the late 1800s and throughout the 1900s is that of the Judeo-Bolshevik, right? So the Jew is either a bourgeois criminal in the popular imagination, or if they're not that, then they are an authoritarian, socialistic, or communistic criminal. They're neither of those things, right? But this is the feature of this, the operations of empire and financial capital in the Eurocentric paradigm. And so they're shifting this argument into something less like a class war and more like a culture war, necessarily to remain credible in what they're doing. And so 6 million Jews die. And all of the Jews that died at the first part of that were people who were those more socialistic or communistic folks. Today shouldn't be discussed without saying that today Jews are basically bad people, as bad as the Eurocentric paradigm folks more generally. Right? Say, oh, I don't know about that, Ben. Geez, that doesn't seem like a too charitable view. Well, they're causing World War III right now, right? As of June 13th, Friday the 13th. That's a good day to start killing off humankind, Friday the 13th. We are seeing an escalation into World War III, caused specifically by the U.S. and Israel axis of evil. And why have these people become this? Well, part of it is this allowing us up to be defined by the worst people that ever lived. Anti-communists, Nazis, fascists, these are all more or less synonymous terms. in practice anyway. Um, this allowing yourself to be defined. So I don't want to be characterized as a Judeo-Bolshevik. Why? Why don't you want to be characterized as a person doing the best work of anyone alive, fighting for a humane and sustainable economic system in a world that will be dead without that fight? Well, I'm just going to let Project Mockingbird of mass brainwashing of people through various media organs and general bourgeois filth define me. I'm going to let the worst people, fascists, define me. It's a horrible choice, right? And um, that wasn't the case. I read a book quite recently, and I might link to it. It's a book about the Zionist project as conceived in the earlier days and how it come to be this more pernicious thing. It was an ill-conceived settler project at every stage, but it was not specifically one designed to be what it became. And it was becoming this, as described in this U.S.-Israel axis of evil. And so the Soviet Union, at the founding of this so-called State of Israel, was none too clear. Just as people were none too clear. They thought, oh, in 1948, it's entirely possible that Albert Einstein would become the long-awaited techno-messiah of Earth, a scientific socialist techno-messiah of Earth, and that Israel will be a state socialist form, a genuine state socialist form, and not a malign democratic socialist form that's also more particularly apartheid, murderous state built on stolen land. And this is a mistake. It's a mistake of trusting the Eurocentric paradigm to do good work in the long term. It can't. It's a mistake of allowing empire and financial capital to continue to hold sway over things and saying that maybe something good will derive from that. It couldn't, and it will not. And so that's why I've worked on these projects to turn this bourgeois AI takeoff that's hastening hyper-capitalistically the death of the planet into the thing that Mr. Yudkowsky completely ignores. This true AI takeoff, the people's AI takeoff. And how have I done that? Well, in the last programs, I talked about the building of the progressive web application. I mentioned the building of other forms. So at this time, I have an alpha version of a progressive web application, a general portal that could be reached through any URL. That would run minimally, at a minimum functionality, the operations that I described, the massified workforce multiplier, but one that's just a slightly bit more functional in one sense. An APK, although it can't run the AI agents at the same level. It can do some other things in a little more efficient way. I built one that is for Linux machines. And the next one to build is one that's for PC machines. But the focus on Linux machines, while there's of course 1,000 times more PC machines than Linux machines, what Linux machines have is a community of people who might actually take an active interest in something like this. They generally, of the philosophy and having open source operating systems in the first place, of supporting this open source project. All of this is open source. I will only ever be an open source software developer. You say, hey Ben, here's a briefcase full of money. Let's be something other than an open source worker. And I'll say, thank you. It's not who I'm going to be. I've been in that position before. And it was a mistake to even flirt with that. It was a mistake, but it was before I had made this study of scientific communism and tried tried to begin to articulate the cybernetic communist outcome. This kind of work is something that you could be doing. Maybe you don't want to work with Ben-Zion. Like I heard that guy's a cannibal. You don't want to work with Ben-Zion. That's fine. I don't think that's a good position. I would like to make the case that I'm a different person than I was a few years ago. But I would understand that you are not of that mind. But I would insist that you do this thing where you fight to build a livable world before it's too late. With 4 years left to stop the U.S. enforced capitalist climate apocalypse. And you can only do that by using the most powerful weapon in history as a truly revolutionary weapon, by using advanced computing. And the idea being that we have to overwhelm and outpace, not merely outthink. Scientific socialists and scientific communists, and people generally of this inclination, Franz Fanon or Malcolm X, in much of his work, these were not scientific communists ostensibly, but they were, in certain respects, more aligned with liberation. The person defending the global south is more aligned with the true liberation outcome than the scientific communists. These people have been outthinking bourgeoisie for better than a century, but they haven't been outrunning them. Fucking close, by a country mile, Jack. They haven't been outrunning them, but you can do that, and you got 4 years. You can do it by building a people's superintelligence, by building formations of this kind, by doing the thing that's missing from this equation. What's missing from this equation when Ben-Zion has a PC application for a people's superintelligence, and some community beginning to coalesce around a Linux application for people's superintelligence, and a web portal that integrates with that, puts it on all machines, and an Android application, and all of this is starting to hum. What's missing from that equation? Massive cultural phenomenon, groundswell toward this building of a humane and sustainable world. The revolution is what's missing, and it should not be said without saying that the only way to do this, not merely to outthink, and not merely to where you, not Albert Einstein, not Stephen Jay Gould, not some other near-term contemporary person yet to be determined, but you become that long-awaited techno-messiah of Earth. But in fact, you're no more an aspirant to involvement in power politics than the cooperative worker at the grocery store that is communally owned, that is worker owned. And yet you build this thing that transforms the industrial base into something survivable, that transforms the other institutions into a new superstructure, that of the cybernetic communist world, this AI